Hey, friends. It's Elizabeth Cronise McLaughlin. You know that already. It's the 24th of October, 2019. We're very much in the middle of the Santa Ana winds here. So if you hear the dog in the background, I know you all love Sophie so much, but if you hear her in the background, it's likely because we have serious winds going on outside now. So please forgive that little ooh that you're going to hear in the background from time to time. All right. It's another day in crazy town. And we have an awful lot to talk about from the standpoint of what happened yesterday. I will tell you that my expectation, just to start, is that today and tomorrow we're going to be a little bit slower. And, you know, part of the reason for that is that Elijah Cummings is lying in state at the Capitol building. There's actually a service ongoing right now. But other than one witness who is testifying in closed session this morning in front of House Intel, there's nothing planned between now and Saturday morning, when there's actually going to be like one more big witness testifying there. So I'm expecting that today and tomorrow we're going to be slow. God knows we need it. Slow, of course, doesn't mean that there's not going to be things happening, but my expectation is that at least from the standpoint of the urgent breaking news, things are going to be slower over the next 2 days. Okay, so before we start, registration for Rise, our last incarnation of Rise for this year and possibly forever, because we are not sure we're going to run it again in 2020, is open for like another week. So I think we close it a week from tomorrow, but I might be wrong about that. If you want to join us, please get in while you can. This cohort is shaping up to be awesome. GaiaLeadershipProject.com/rise. Also, I put out on the Facebook page this morning, we're doing something really we haven't done now in like almost 3 years. I'm opening up just a very limited universe of private coaching slots for the fall. So if you're interested in like maybe 3, it might not even be that. If you're interested in joining us for that, please reach out to the team at info@GaiaLeadershipProject.com. Those are slots that are ordinarily reserved for like all of our very senior executives at our corporate gigs. So we're doing it this year. Very rare opportunity, may not come again. So if you're interested in doing that with me, please hop on over to the info box. All right. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, let's start with like the crazy developments from yesterday. So Matt Gaetz and his merry band of frat boys stormed the SCIF yesterday morning. The SCIF, you all remember, is the secured facility in the basement of the congressional office building where, as we discussed yesterday, you have to leave your phones outside. Classified information is disclosed in there. All of our foreign enemies have been wanting to get into the SCIF for quite some time, and all these men walked in there with their cell phones, sat down for 5 hours and ordered pizza. I will say that the humor around this was quite amusing. You know, there were plenty of jokes by the Democrats who were in the room, but the thing that is disturbing about it is that it shows us now the length to which the cult of Trump on the Hill is willing to go to interfere with legitimate congressional process. Now, I will remind you all, Benghazi hearings were held in the SCIF. No less than Trey Gowdy kicked Darrell Issa out of the SCIF at one time when he tried to get in to listen to testimony. And, you know, any other person with security clearance who entered a SCIF with a cell phone would lose their job. So it's what happened yesterday is no joke. It's also a felony, by the way. You know, there's plenty of people running around on Twitter this morning circulating the actual U.S. code for criminal violations of what happened yesterday with sentences of up to a year in prison. So it was a very strange little stunt, not least of which because something like 13 of the people who stormed the SCIF already had access to the SCIF as members of the committees that are hearing testimony for purposes of impeachment. The whole thing was fundamentally like a version of a show trial. I mean, that's probably the best way to put it. It's like, it was really just a publicity stunt. They handed out even expired press passes to uncertified members of the press in order to kind of get them in to videotape the whole thing. So it was a show. It did shut down testimony for 5 hours. The witness who was there to testify nonetheless stayed and did complete her testimony last night. You know, I do think it's something to watch. I certainly think that it's something that should be sanctioned. I'm a little surprised that we didn't see an arrest because apparently a couple of them asked to be arrested. You know, that's how serious they were about this. But the one thing I will say is that the sergeant at arms walked into the SCIF at one point right before they actually started testimony again. And that apparently was the trigger point for the people who were still sitting there on the floor to leave. Yes, they can have their security clearances revoked for this. Yes, there can be a sanction by the House of Representatives. There's noises about both of those things happening this morning. But again, we're going to have to wait and see sort of what the developments are on that front. Again, the thing I want to point out the most is that it's a willingness to disrupt the lawful process of Congress. And that really should worry everyone. I mean, there were people joking last night about the fact that it's just a matter of weeks before we have punches thrown on the floor of the House. That's not actually a joke. That has happened in petty dictatorships around the world over lesser things than an impeachment proceeding. So again, we're going to have to wait and see what the next developments are on that front. But it was kind of a huge deal yesterday morning. All right. The other thing that was a bit of breaking news yesterday was that Parnas and Fruman were arraigned yesterday in New York City. And they made this very strange accusation during their arraignment. And that was that some of what they knew or were being asked to disclose might be subject to executive privilege. Now, those of you who have been watching the broadcast for some time know that the limits on executive privilege are really tight. Like, you are not allowed to assert executive privilege, if you're not in the executive branch. Parnas and Fruman aren't in the executive branch, as far as we know. Executive privilege is also, by the way, usually limited to kind of communications with the president about like strategic issues. Parnas and Fruman, funded by the Russian mafia, are advising the president on strategic issues? I don't think so. Maybe. But it sounds like a really serious stretch. Now, the leg that they may think they have to stand on, of course, is Rudy Giuliani's involvement in all of this, and the fact that Rudy Giuliani is the private attorney of the president. That still means that executive privilege shouldn't extend to him because executive privilege remains in the White House. But it was a little weird. It was all really weird. And it certainly made a bunch of us go, huh? Like, how do you think that's going to apply? And good luck with that one. So that was very strange. And, I will also add that Parnas in particular was asked to turn over certain information related to bank accounts held in his wife's name. That in and of itself is another sort of like red flag that there may already be cooperation here that we're not aware of. So we have, again, things that we don't know about this quite yet. But that in and of itself was weird. There was also a little bit of breaking news last night that Rudy Giuliani is now on the hunt for a defense attorney. He's going to have a really hard time getting one. But, that in and of itself is also an indication now that he's expecting potentially to be indicted. So that again is something quite significant to watch. And, for those of you who, are interested in the full download of all these connections back to the Russian mafia, through Parnas, through Giuliani, as documented on Parnas's Instagram account. Rachel did a really great opening A block on this last night that summed it all up in like 26 minutes. It was really quite astonishing. So I'd encourage all of you to kind of go and watch that because it tags all the way back to whether or not there's literally Russian money flowing directly into the Oval Office through Firtash to Parnas, to Rudy, to the president. Again, nothing surprises me anymore about this. All right. So in any event, that's that. We had breaking news this morning that Italy has now come forward and said they had no role in the investigations into the 2016 election. The thing that's kind of nuts about this is that Bill Barr has already made 2 trips to Italy to try to figure out the origin of the Steele dossier, basically, and particularly Joseph Mifsud's deposition, which he was shown in Italy. All of this, I will remind you all, is like disproven conspiracy theory that your taxpayer dollars are being spent on while Bill Barr flies around the world farming out this stuff, trying to figure out if there's any, actual real evidence that the 2016 election was interfered with so Donald Trump could win. It's nuts. It's really nuts. But, the thing I just want to point out here, we've had a lot of this over the last few weeks, is that the embarrassment of the United States on the international stage as a result of things like this, like Italy having to come out and say, we didn't have anything to do with this and why are you asking us about it? It is again, shameful. And again, none of this ends until he's gone. So, all right. So that happened in the last 24 hours as well. We had a couple of questions about the issue of treason. So, we did a big broadcast on treason like in 2017 and what treason is alleged to be under the law. There are ongoing debates about whether or not you can be found liable for treason if the party that you are benefiting inside the United States is is someone that is not subject to a declaration of war by the Congress. Now, there are great legal minds, mine potentially included, who think that, you know, being under attack by the Russians in the form of a cyber attack for the 2016 election should constitute an act of war such that the treason statute could apply. By the way, there's also like several clauses within the treason statute. And in one of them, giving aid and comfort to the enemy is interpreted by some to be a separate clause from the one requiring the timing of war. You know, we don't really have any debate here that the president has given aid and comfort to people who are arguably enemies of the United States. The question is whether or not anybody really wants to go so far as to try to throw out a treason allegation in impeachment or in a prosecution. And, you know, given the kind of like debates about the law, you know, I happen to fall within this, the realm that says, of course, it's treason. And when you look at the law and analyze it, and you apply the facts to the law. But there are a lot of other people who, rightfully so, say there are much easier counts to make out against this president in light of the fact that there is this sort of dispute about what constitutes treason if there's not a declaration of war by the United States Congress. So, you know, I mean, the point I want to remind you all of here is that, you know, there's lots of really beautiful revenge fantasies that we all have about how the president may be removed from office. I still, from a strategic legal standpoint, want the quickest, easiest case to be made to get him out. Because, you know, you can't remove this president from office 50 times. You only remove him once. And the point of, as I've been saying on the broadcast quite a bit over the last 10 days, is that we need to get him out of power because none of this ends until his hands are off the reins. So we don't have to allege treason against him, in other words, to get him out of office. And then he'll be prosecuted for any legitimate crime under New York state law or federal law if he's not pardoned. And, you know, we'll go from there. But, you know, my key point right now, and this is one of the reasons why I'm behind the strategy that's currently being adopted by the Democrats, is the quickest, tightest case to get him out is what we need. All right. Speaking of which, there are growing signs still at this moment inside the Republican Party that there are cracks forming around whether or not the Senate would vote to impeach. Elie Mystal, who many of you know, is the editor of Above the Law. He's also a contributing writer at The Nation. He's on Joy Reid all the time. He and I talk all the time. We go back. He's written a really good article today in The Nation about how to flip 20 votes in the Senate. And I've posted it on my Twitter feed. I really encourage all of you to go watch it because it's read it, because it's a really strong piece about the fact that, like, all we have to do is count to 20. And there is a way to get there. We don't have to flip everybody in the Senate. We don't have to flip Lindsey Graham. We don't have to flip, for that matter, like any of these folks who are still very far into the Trump camp. We only have to flip 20. And it's not out of the realm of possibility that we could do it. Particularly if we see the more moderate, reasonable, more traditionalist, conservative Republicans starting to have had enough. And we have inklings of that in places like John Thune, as we talked about yesterday, in places like Mitt Romney. So there's a way to get there. And, you know, one of the things that Elie is calling for and that I have called for and that I think is incredibly significant is that we have to put public pressure on these senators, these Republican senators, to remove him. That's the greatest point of access right now. That is fundamentally the only hindrance to removing this president from office. So we should do it. And, you know, just so you're aware, McConnell and Graham are doing another kind of like showy distraction today of getting a censure vote to condemn. It's not really a censure vote, but they're going to introduce a resolution to condemn the impeachment proceeding in the House. They're going to introduce it in the Senate. The thing about this is it's sort of stupid strategically, because it's going to give a preview vote, basically, of where the Republicans stand right now. It might not turn out as pretty as they think it will. And, you know, I don't know if I was Mitch McConnell, if I would have thought this was such a good idea. But we'll see. We'll see how that one shakes out. It has no teeth. It can't stop the proceedings in the House, just FYI. It's literally like a piece of paper saying, like, we condemn you. And that's it. I don't think they're going to get what they think they're going to get out of that. But again, we'll see. All right. One of you asked a question about all of these various diplomats and people in the State Department. And all this stuff regarding Ukraine and why they didn't come forward until now. So let me just say this. You know, the whistleblower complaint was filed in early August. The call involving Zelensky and Trump was on the 25th of July. There was a gap of maybe, you know, like 12 days, 13 days, something like that, between that call and when the formal whistleblower complaint was filed. We know that the whistleblower reached out to the Intelligence Committee in the House in advance of that. and was told to follow formal procedures. We also know the whistleblower had conversations with other people in the diplomatic corps who are not identified necessarily within the formal whistleblower complaint about the evidence concerning the president's illegality with regard to Ukraine. So I actually don't think that what we're seeing right now is some like everybody waited to come forward kind of story. I want to remind you all that what we know going back at least to May of this year is that the president, Rudy Giuliani, Pompeo, Rick Perry, Mick Mulvaney, and Attorney General Barr purposefully went around the traditional diplomatic corps, like totally evaded them to whatever extent they possibly could, including by removing the ambassador, in order to engage in their own strategic, personal, political strategy with regard to Ukraine, withholding aid, blackmailing the Ukrainian president, basically, to create false dirt on Biden. So some of what we are seeing in the testimony, and this is something that should be reflected, is that it took even the most senior members of the diplomatic corps with regard to Ukraine some time to put together what was actually happening, because things sounded funny. And there were questions even in the text messages up until September of like, are we really doing this? Because it would be crazy to withhold aid. I mean, this is, Taylor's testimony, right? From his text messages. And as he testified just 2 days ago, it would be crazy to withhold aid to Ukraine in exchange for political intervention in the 2020 election. I think that it is quite actually inaccurate to say that all these people waited to come forward until now. One of the things you have to remember here also is that ordinarily, conversations that are had at the highest diplomatic levels are not for public consumption, right? And rightfully so. We don't really want our diplomatic corps like running to the press every time they have a conversation that may be designed to create more peace in a region, or may be designed to arrange for an aid package to fight the Russians, right? We don't want our diplomatic corps like spewing private conversations all over the public domain. The privacy and secrecy of those negotiations is sometimes really key to actually getting the work done. So it really just doesn't look to me at all like we've had a situation where people have like held anything back. In fact, what we're seeing now is a sort of floodgates. I'll remind you all that it was only September 12th that this aid was actually released. We're talking like 5 weeks ago, and that all of this came to a head. So again, got to look at the full timetable of it, as well as the scope of what's been going on in relation to this, and all the efforts of the president and his people to hide it and secrete it and remove it from diplomatic channels and keep people who ordinarily would need to be in the loop in any conversation about these sorts of things out of the loop so that they could commit their crimes. That's what conspiracy is all about. So I feel honestly like the timetable on all of this has been quite rapid. Again, we're like 2 months out from the whistleblower complaint being filed. So that's where we are on that today. Again, there's more testimony happening now. From the standpoint of where we're going to find ourselves in terms of timetables toward impeachment, the other little bit of breaking news last night was on the fact that Adam Schiff is now anticipating that there will be a public discussion about impeachment by the second week in November. That may mean a vote. That's still 3 weeks away. I understand that they're shoring up their testimony and they need the time to get that. I still feel like that's way too long, but nonetheless, we're reaching a kind of critical turning point in this process toward impeachment. And, McConnell has told people, as we've discussed many times on this broadcast in the last week, to be ready for impeachment trials at Thanksgiving in the Senate. So we got to hold on for the ride, because it's going to be another bumpy few weeks at least until we get to an actual trial. It's crazy. All right. As I said, Elijah Cummings services today. Obama is speaking at that. There's going to be a lot to listen to there that hopefully will be kind of like nurturing and soothing to our souls in these trying times. I'll just remind you all, like humor helps. Doing a bit to laugh helps. I did a whole Twitter thread last night on wildest predictions on what might happen to distract from the impeachment proceedings, which I know had some of you rolling. So I had some fun with that. But please do what you need to do right now to kind of stay grounded. And like I said, I do feel like the next 2 days are going to be slower just simply because of the coming services. And we're not anticipating that there's going to be any witness testimony tomorrow of any kind. There is going to be witness testimony on Saturday. All right. Last thing, our RISE program, as I mentioned, is only open for registration. This is the last time we're offering it in 2019. Class starts 11/11 for another week. So please get in there while you can. GaiaLeadershipProject.com/RISE. And I want to thank all of you who have already registered. We have a really good cohort coming together here. It's going to be an amazing community of women and others. Super stoked about it. And this may very well be the last time we offer the program. We don't have any plans right now to offer it in 2020. If there's high demand, we might, but this may be your last chance to get in. And I'd love to see as many of you in there as possible. So GaiaLeadershipProject.com/RISE. Much love to all of you. And I will talk to all of you tomorrow. And hopefully we'll have a little bit of a break for the next 48 hours. That would be nice. All right. Bye, everybody.